Hi, welcome to the Dr. Paul Show. I have this pleasure of bringing my patient on, Kristen. How long have you been my patient now?
Oh my gosh, we were trying to figure that out. At least 20
I think it's
some
at
years.
least 20 years, probably back when I was doing primary care
Yes.
even.
Yes.
So back when I was even doing primary care, which was about 20 some years ago. So anyway, it was a long time. So I wanted to bring her in because she has a great story to tell. She's been just a pleasure to work with over the years. And so anyways, just Kristen, I'll give it up to you.
Okay, well, I guess I'll start from the beginning when things started to kind of go south, uh, which was when we were living in California. And I had two sisters, which I still do. My mom and dad were married. And my dad started just buying things randomly and not talking it over with my mom. And my mom she couldn't handle it. And so she just started drinking. And that was how she coped. And the drinking got worse. And the family problems got worse. But my dad just kept buying. And he ended up buying this piece of property over on Lake Mission Viejo. It was a lot. And this was before Reagan. And interest rates were really high and things like that. He bought this lot and he built this mansion. That's what we called it. And it was a gated community. And my mom she just went crazy drinking. She was a teacher. She kept it together until she got off work. And then after that, it just was a nightmare at home. Now, my dad also was a pilot. So because he flew for TWA, he was gone a lot. And at that point, I probably was 17, and my sister's going 4 years younger than me, and then another 4 years for my other sister. So basically, I was in charge.
That was like late 1970s then, yeah.
Late 80s.
Oh,
Early 80s. Early
yeah,
80s. Yeah. Yes. And so what ended up happening during that period of time is we all started having our own coping mechanisms just to try to make our lives feel in control. So for me, I developed an eating disorder. And it was pretty serious. I was down to like 89 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty severe.
How old were you then?
17, and then it continued on for several years. My middle sister started becoming a kleptomaniac. Not only that, she would take the car keys out and she'd just take the extra cars and drive around. And she wasn't even, I don't think she had a driver's license. And then my youngest sister, she just got lost in it all, and I don't even know what happened with her. I was trying to keep track of things, but I wasn't capable at that point. I was lost in my eating disorder and lost in the chaos. My dad, he decided, he knew that all this was going on when he would come home. My mom sometimes would lock us out of the house at night, and we had no way to get in. And this was a huge mansion, and so I had to figure out how to get in. And I knew I'd left my window open on the third floor, and I would have to find a way to climb in and figure out what window was unlocked so I could get in. One night, my mom was so drunk, and my sister had a friend over. My mom came out completely naked with a shotgun, and she was going to kill one of us that night. And I was able to get the shotgun from her and get it out of her hands because she was that drunk, and she was stumbling around. It was so embarrassing. I mean, there were many embarrassing things like that, and I don't know that to this day she ever would admit to that. But anyway, so all these weird things were happening, and we were telling my dad about it, and he goes, okay, well, we're going to go to family therapy. So we went up to the care unit, and that's what it was called back then, and it was in Santa Ana, and it was called, we had a family therapy where all of us were in therapy together in one room, and then we had individual therapy where, I was in with a group of people my age, then my sisters were in with another group, my dad and my mom were in with another group, and so on and so forth. And I'm telling you, that was a train wreck, because what ended up happening was that all of us started sabotaging one another. And I don't think that was a very good therapy setting. So, yeah. So when we were pulled apart as a family, so we would tell things about one another, and then we would go back into this family therapy with just all five of us, and the therapist Marge, and then she would say, well, Kristen, your father says yada yada yada, and your mother says yada yada about you, and you told me something else completely. And so it became this horrible thing. Anyway, we finally finished up with that, and the bottom line was we were going to give my mom an intervention. And we had it all planned out, how it was going to happen. Well, my mom caught wind of it somehow, and she sabotaged the intervention. So she ended up going to a friend's house, and she got clean and sober. Okay, and she got a sponsor. And she started to get better. And my dad just continued on with his buying and everything. Well, anyway, the fact of the matter is the money ran out. My dad had to swap the house, the mansion, for a really small house down the way. The guy who owned the small house, he just did a trade. So my dad basically lost everything, and he just traded the house for a small house.
Sounds like he was bipolar.
I wanted him to come see you, yes.
Yeah, it sounds like he's bipolar, yeah.
So anyway, we swapped the house. My mom was sober. My dad was drinking, always had been, and we were all supposed to stop drinking back in the therapy days, and he said he was, but he never did. In fact, none of us quit drinking, to be honest. We all were drinking. We got back to, we're back in that small house, and all of the unhealthy behaviors were still going on with everyone except my mom, because she was healthy and the rest of us were not. I still had an eating disorder, but it wasn't, I had put on weight, but I was now bulimic, and so I was dealing with that. My sisters were still doing their unhealthy things, so it was not a good mix. I went off to college. My sister ran away. I mean, there was another tumultuous situation. So then I get married. My husband that I married, he was really a savior for me, and my eating disorder thankfully got under control. And from that point on, I really have not had any issues. I really think that was a life-saving moment for me to just be pulled out of that situation at home. And
you had been anorexic, then you turned bulimic, then, right?
Yeah, and then I just was able to kind of move on. But that had been going on for so many years, I'd lost my period. That had been going on since I was like 17, and I got married when I was 24. Anyway, so my dad was drinking all the time still. My mom was really angry about it, and when we would go over to see them and stuff, he would be passed out on the couch when he was still flying and all. He also had taken on an international job, and what ended up happening is my mom told me, he's having an affair. I know he's having an affair. And I go, well, you need to divorce him. She would not have anything to do with that. So my dad, we all knew he was, but he said he wasn't. So anyway, my dad, he ended up being the biggest problem for all of us, I think, in the end. My mom was not a big drinker before he started all this stuff. And he still, to this day, is pretty much a big drinker, but not like he was. And to this day, okay, my mom ended up passing away. She had cancer. She had bone cancer in her jaw and in her throat because she was a big smoker. And what ended up happening is she went back and forth into the hospital. She died like when she was 64. I'm 62. But it was heartbreaking to see. And because she had radiation here, all of her arteries were corroded due to the radiation, and so she stroked out several times until a point where she stroked out too many times, and then she just passed on. Well, that relieved my dad, so he could hang out with the gal that he'd been having an affair with for all this time. So, being the Catholic that he is, he invited her into his home. They weren't married. And so there he is doing that. And anyway, so basically that's how things were with the family. And my sisters and I hated my dad. And we were so angry with him because of all of that. So we weren't really communicating. Well, I was teaching and had been teaching for many years, and I had this really good girlfriend, and we just had a blast together teaching, and we'd been teaching together for like, I don't know, 16 years or something. Also, my husband, he was working at the school district as well, doing maintenance. He was in the maintenance department. Well, one day he lost his job due to seniority issues. Just lost it. And my best friend told me that she wasn't going to be working anymore. Her husband let her off the hook or whatever. She was going to get to be a stay-home mom. And that was always what I wanted to do. And I was making this commute from where I lived, which was in Lake Elsinore, and I was working in Portola Hills. So it was like an hour and 20-minute commute one way, and then back again where we were living, because we had this beautiful house with a lot of acreage, and that was the trade-off. Now my best friend is saying she's not working with me anymore. My husband had just lost his job, and I don't know. I just kind of had a freaking meltdown. I did, and I don't know why I had this huge meltdown, but I just felt like my life was going out of control. And I was in your doctor's office one day, and I was there to see somebody else for some other reason. And my life was like, it was like a house of cards, because I lived so far away and my kids were little, and I had to have them being watched by somebody if I had an appointment in town. So everything was like lined up perfectly. And if one thing went wrong, then the whole thing fell down. So I check in, and the gal goes, "Oh, you don't have an appointment today." I go, "Oh, yes, I do. I do have an appointment. It's right here." And she's, "No, you have it a month from today." I go, "No." And then I just started crying. And it was such a stupid thing. Now I think about it. But at the time, I was like having like a heart, my heart was pounding. I was sobbing. And she goes, okay, just a minute. Let me see what I can do. She comes back out and she goes, Dr. Corona will see you now. I go, "Oh, okay."
I happen to have the perfect guy to see you.
Yeah, so I go in there. I'm still crying, and then you walk in, and you said, "Okay, calm down. Tell me what's going on." You said, "Tell me everything that's going on from the very beginning," just like I just did, and I did. I told you pretty much everything, and then and at the end, I remember some of the things you said. You said, "How about if I tell you, I can make you feel as good as you probably felt the last time you felt good, maybe around 16. And I go, I said you'd be a liar. and you said, "Well, would you trust me?" And I said, "I guess." I go, "I have no other choice." And then you said, "How about if I tell you that you'll sleep like a baby and wake up feeling refreshed and young again," or something like that. And I said, "Oh my gosh." I said, "I'd call you a liar." And then you said, "Well, would you trust me?" And I said, "I have no choice." And he said, "It's going to take, you said it might take some time to get it just right." But he goes, "But I think I can help you tonight if you let me." And I think you gave me some Effexor that day. And you said, "You're going to probably feel really tired." And I did. But it was like, it took all of that. There was so much stress that was like bottled up in me, and it just kind of went away that very day. And I did fall asleep earlier that day. And then it was really hard when we were first walking through all this, the first week or so, because that Effexor was making me kind of tired after a few hours after taking it. But we worked through, I don't know, a lot of stuff to try to get it just right. And after about a year, we kind of got it to it was perfect. And you saved my life. That's always I say. I say to all my friends, I go, this man saved my life, because I didn't realize how unhappy how unhappy and how stressed out I had been all my life.
That was your normal. I mean, that was what you knew. That's all you knew.
And I'm like, I didn't realize that I was walking around just unhappy, and how free I felt. Not like I was high, nothing like that. Just how calm and how just free from that. I was always like that. You know, the glass is always half full. You know, it was never, is that the one? Half empty. That's what I mean. You know, everything was negative. You know, everything. I never could see the good. It was always, oh no. I was always worried, you know. You know, I was always, oh no, you know, I might have cancer. You know, I was always like that, you know, and none of that anymore, you know. And it was just a blessing. And to this day, you know, my husband at first was like, well, are you going to still have to take all those pills? You know, isn't he going to wean you off? And I was like, I don't want to be weaned off. No, I don't. No, this is perfect, just like this. And I think I've just stayed on this basic program that we've got going, you know, and you always ask, you know, do you feel any different? Have you seen any changes? And I haven't, and I don't think I probably ever will. I mean, you know, I thought in the beginning I wouldn't probably need any more. Maybe I would, you know, taper off, but I'm happy.
Well, I think I look back, we start with Effexor, and that's what that does is it kind of de-stresses your system, helps you sleep, and makes you tired. So what I did then I added Wellbutrin.
Yes.
And what that does is it restores your energy back, you know, because that's working on dopamine. And I think then eventually we went to Topamax and then to Seroquel.
Yes.
Do you remember that transition when we added the Topamax and Seroquel? What happened there?
You know, I don't. I remember the Seroquel was like a lifesaver. Because I would always wake up in the middle of the night, and then in the morning I was always so stiff and sore because I would sleep like this, you know, I closed up and in stress, and that just kind of like relaxed me, you know, and that was another game changer for me. I could just relax. And I think in one of our conversations you had said, you know what, Kristen, people who've experienced some kind of trauma triggers this chemical imbalance. And you had mentioned, you know, the anorexia and the stuff that I had gone through, and I go, well, I guess I did go through some trauma, and that's probably what started it. And it made perfect sense to me, you know. And I go, God, I got to get my dad in here, you know. And I think he went maybe one time, but he said, I don't need any of that, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
See, and then, you know, in your case, you know, and people who watch the show, you know that I talk about, you know, the causes of things and genetics.
Yes.
Okay, so you have genetics on both sides, mom and dad.
Yes.
You know, that sets you up for it. That's most people who have these imbalances have strong genetics, and you know, especially when you have it on both sides of the family like you do. And probably if you trace it back, and not also your sisters. And you probably trace it back to your mom's mom and dad, your dad's mom and dad.
Yeah.
You're probably going to see some history. Maybe there's alcoholism. Maybe there's something else going on. You know, some people, a lot of cigarettes. You know, this is before modern drugs were around. Secondarily, hormonal change times. You know, puberty, after having kids.
Yeah.
You know, menopause. You know, trauma. You know, I mean, you grew up with trauma. Your dad. your mom, all that, And when you develop an eating disorder as bad as you had it, that's a tough thing to get over too. That's really tough to resolve. How did you eventually resolve that?
Well, I mean, you'll never get over it. I mean, in my mind, I'm constantly always thinking about food.
Yeah.
I just am, and I always think about, if I eat that, then I can't eat that.
Right, right.
If this, then that. And, body image, I think I will always have a screwed up body image of myself. So it's not resolved completely. Do you know what I'm saying?
That's typical.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but as far as like the throwing up and, starving myself, those things, I just think it was God just gave me a gift.
Yeah.
And that was Robin. And
Yeah.
and I thank him for that.
Now, how old were you when you first saw me? If it was 20.
It had to have been 46 or 45.
So so that's the first time you were exposed to any kind of medication then?
Yeah.
When you were, wow.
Yeah.
So how were you feeling in your 20s and then in your 30s before you saw me? How were you feeling then as far as like mood and?
Well, it just got progressively worse.
Right.
It just started getting worse and worse, and my outbursts were out of proportion. Like, I can remember one day I had a bunch of dry cleaning on the washing machine, and I came home and Robin thought he was doing me a favor, and he put all of my laundry in the dry cleaning stuff in the washing machine and into the dryer, and I came home and all of it, like the wool stuff had shrunken into and like other things were messed up, and I started screaming at him about that and yelling and started crying. I just went off the rails. I can remember that night. And the kids got up out of bed and they were crying. And Robin was just standing there looking at me. It was out. And that's when I kind of started thinking, oh my God, what am I doing? But I couldn't stop myself. I couldn't stop. And I started thinking backwards in time, and there just started becoming little things like that. And there also, Robin always said, why not come out and meet the neighbors? They want to see you. They want to talk to you. And I would not. I was like, socially, I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I just kept, I didn't know how to talk with other people. I didn't want to. I kept inside all the time. Come on, Kristen, let's go over. They're having a barbecue over here. I wouldn't do it. And I don't know why, but I wouldn't. Now today, I had no trouble doing that. But I just didn't. I had no idea how to socialize. And that got progressively worse. I don't know what that was about, but it's the truth. That's just the truth of it. And the only way I really could is if I had a drink. Now, if I had a couple of drinks, I might be able to go over there, but not just sober. Yeah. And that all started, in my 30s. I think in my 30s, and it just got progressively worse.
So did you ever end up developing a drinking problem then?
No.
No. Not like mom or no.
Oh, God, no.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
No.
Yeah. No shotguns.
No shotguns. No walking around naked with my friends.
No locking your kids out of the house.
No. Nothing like that. Never. No.
Yeah. Well, and and the whole point of is oh my gosh, I'm on 4 things. See, you get it. Because a lot of patients struggle with that. Don't put me on 3 things. I want to be on 2 things, and it's like, okay, well, how good do you want me to get you feeling? And so sometimes it's difficult. But there are some cases where short term's okay. For example, if someone loses a loved one, and you can't always medicate grief because you have to get through grief. But let's say someone doesn't have a strong family history, doesn't have any other major history, just is going through a bad time, and then you want to get them through that time better. And so some people like that, 6 to 12 months, you take them off and they're fine. In your case, it's more of a chronic issue.
Yeah.
Your genetics are strong. And when your genetics are as strong as yours, you know, they're lifelong. But so what? I mean, there's a lot of medications we give to people: blood pressure medications, thyroid medication, diabetes medications. There's a lot of medications that people take and don't think twice about it.
Yeah.
Supplements, vitamins, a host of things that people have no problem taking. But sometimes people get caught up with, well, these, I don't want to be on these ones. Like,
Yeah.
what about these ones? Oh, well, people say, you know, I looked it up online, and
Yeah.
and you know, so people have the wrong idea about what they're doing. And well, can you take one away? Well, I said, well, I could. But you want to feel less good than you are now? You know, I can do that. I can take this one away, and some people will do it, you know. And some, I mean, I had a patient come in last week, and she was doing really well on what she was on, and she said, I want to try this. I want to try Celexa. And I go, and I look back, and she goes, my friend is on it, and she's doing great on it. I want to try it. And I go, well, you're on Prestige right now, and that's better. And I said, and I looked through her records. I said, well, you were on Zoloft before. Zoloft is the same family as Celexa. I said, that didn't work for you, but she had to do it. And I said, okay, I'm going to give it to you, but just my warning is, I predict it's not going to work. She goes, okay, and she took it anyway. She called me like a week or two later, and she's like, oh my gosh, take me off of this stuff. I go, can I put you back on what you're on before? Yes, please put me back on it. And so you know, but sometimes I got to do that. Sometimes, you know, people get something stuck in their mind where they have to do something. You know, this is why I advise people: do not get advice from your friends or your family members. Please don't do it. You know,
Yeah.
because whatever they're on that works for you, well, you have nothing to do with them. You don't have genetics that are similar to them. You know, that's not you.
Why do you think my dad is bipolar?
Because it probably, if I knew about his parents, it's probably got it from his parents. Well, with the buying spree,
Oh yeah.
with the excessive buying spree,
Oh.
that's you know, for bipolar patients, they have a problem with shopping. They have a problem going to and getting like 10 of something when they should get 1 or 2 of something.
Yeah.
And they just buy, even if they don't have the money.
Yes.
Then they get into financial problems, but they can't stop the impulsive buying. So that's a bipolar trait.
Oh, okay.
And that also goes with heavy drinking.
Yeah.
But it's genetic. So do you know anything about his parents' history?
Well, yeah, but I don't pick. They were poor, so I can't imagine that they had a buying
Well,
problem.
no, not buying, but as far as mentally, do you know if they struggled with any addictions or alcoholism?
Both his brothers, yes, they
Okay,
were severe drinkers.
Right. So there's, you know, mostly you can trace it back to genetics. You know, that's it's the number one cause. It's not stressors. People focus on the situational stressors because that's the only thing we can focus on. Because people say, well, it's because of this or that. And yeah, it could be this or that. You know, I mean, it could be for sure. I mean, especially with you, with what you grew up with, in the chaos. But yeah, it's typically that's what causes a lot. I mean, for example, there's a lot of people have it really good, you know, in life. They're successful. They have plenty of money. They have no worries, and they're miserable, you know. And so some people, it has nothing to do with how much you have and how much you can spend. It's just that you have the genetics, you know.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, famous rich people, you know, are miserable.
Oh, it's kind of like that guy Matthew Perry.
Yeah, Matthew Perry.
That book I read. Same kind of thing.
And you know, he was self-medicating with ketamine, and
Yeah.
he overdid it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Robin Williams killing himself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that was a shocker to me. You know, because I was a huge fan of his, and that was, you know, and he's the guy you would never think.
Never.
You know, because he was so funny and he was so talented,
Mm-hmm.
and comedian, actor, everything was so amazing, and that really affected me, that suicide.
Mm-hmm.
For sure, because I just was, even though I understood, you know, because he had problem with addiction, he was bipolar, you know, but that's, you know, you can't always explain it away with the circumstances.
Right.
When people have it really well, you would think, you know, some of these people who are famous in Hollywood, or all these people, some of them have anxiety. Some people, famous singers, have a stage fright, or they have social anxiety, and you're thinking, well,
How could that possibly be?
they're singing in front of millions of people, all these thousands of
Yeah.
people. But they get through it. They probably self-medicate a little bit. They probably drink before they get out there. They probably do some Xanax or whatever they do before they go on stage. But they get through it, but they struggle, and they would think, gosh, aren't they used to it by now? Aren't they used to all the adoration and the fans? But, not always. I mean, the people struggle. Twitch, I don't know if you know Twitch, who that was. He was a dancer. He was on the Ellen DeGeneres show. And he was a happy guy, and, he was always, smiling and dancing. And he had a wife and 2 young kids. And he left his home one night, checked into a hotel room, and shot himself in the head.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. He was on the show called So You Think You Can Dance.
Oh yeah.
And he did really well a certain season, and he didn't win the season, but he did so well that he got a lot of attention. And so he was really famous. He made a lot of money, but he was obviously depressed. And he made it look good on the outside. He looked so happy, but
he wasn't.
But his wife had called the police and said something's wrong. My husband left. He didn't take his car. He didn't. There's something wrong. He doesn't do this. And they were, and they found him later. And so, it's miserable. But I'm just happy for you because you've been doing so well. You've been so stable.
Yes.
We haven't made any medications for you for like several years.
Yeah, no changes.
I think we just leave everything alone and everything is good. And,
Yeah.
The only reason to change anything is if you start getting like side effects or something. But yeah, but the best is just to stay the course. If anyone ever says you should get off of them, just ignore them.
Well, and before we close the show, I have gone through so many difficult life situations since I moved up to Oregon. I've lost several jobs. My husband has lost several jobs. We almost went through bankruptcy. I mean, and if I had not had the opportunity to have met you and gotten well, I don't know how our marriage would have survived, nor if I might have survived through all that. I think about that all the time. I mean, yeah, sure, it wasn't easy, but I wasn't frozen in time, or panicked or.
Well, who thinks about it all the time is me. I think about it all the time. I mean, I'm always thinking about, because I hear from people, my relatives in this state or that, and and there's so many people out there suffering, and it drives me to keep going. And now I'm writing 2 books for doctors, actually, to train doctors. But that's what drives me. I see that there's a lot of people out there suffering needlessly, and I'm trying to do as much as I can. Yeah. But I want to do more, and that's what drives me to keep going and writing my books and doing what I do, is because I want to help people at a bigger level.
Yeah.
And I want to hopefully train doctors to help their patients, because the majority of doctors, primary care doctors, don't really know what to do. A lot of psychiatrists, not to be negative and to down psychiatrists, but a lot of psychiatrists aren't that good at it. And they don't understand how to combine medications properly. I mean, there's not to down them, because there's a lot of them do really, really good job. But the problem is access. There's not as many of them as primary care doctors. They're very expensive. They don't tend to spend a lot of time with people. So I think primary care doctors, in my view, should play a lead role in this. But unfortunately, most of them don't know exactly what to do. So this is my mission, is to change that. That's what I want to do.
That's a great mission to have.
So, well, thank you for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to see you.
Okay.
Thank
you.
So in Kristen's case, she was it's kind of a complex case. Given her history, she had quite a history with her eating disorder, and by the time I saw her, like it was in her early 40s, I believe. She had gone through quite a history at that point. So when I first saw her, she was kind of a mess. She had a lot of anxiety. She wasn't sleeping. So my first thought was the SNRI. So normally better than SSRI. So it's, again, the serotonin, norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor. So it's inhibiting the reuptake of serotonin, and then norepinephrine. And so what that's doing is it's getting those chemicals moving that way, not that way. And what that did, and she, like as she said, is she felt relaxed, she felt calm, she was sleeping better, but she was tired. That's not unusual, okay? That's can happen, and it happens a lot. So when I hear that, what do? I add Wellbutrin. So what does Wellbutrin do? It's an NDRI, and so it stands for norepinephrine dopamine reuptake inhibitor. But it works a little bit on norepinephrine like Effexor does, but it really works more on dopamine. So when I put that in, I call the wow of Wellbutrin motivation, energy. So that takes care of the fatigue, and that combination was for a while. That's all she was on, but then she still has residual anxiety, and again, she was also concerned because she thought she was eating too much. She was under stress, and with her history of eating disorder and bulimia, that was concerning because I didn't want her to fall back into bad patterns. So I put her on Topamax, and Topamax I use a lot for anxiety. I use it for painful conditions, for headaches, a lot of things. Now that works on GABA. So I call it's a GABAergic medication. It means that it improves the flow of GABA. And so when you do that, it has effects of, it relaxes the system, and then everything is connecting to the next cell. It relaxes the system, it helps with pain, it helps with anxiety. The other problem she had is that her sleep was better initially, but then it got bad again. So I put her on Seroquel, and Seroquel is really probably the best sleeping product especially for tough sleep, for persistent sleep. I prescribe a lot of it. But now Seroquel is that we call a dopamine antagonist. So why would you want to do that? Because we have dopamine going this way. Well, that's great, but the problem is if we get dopamine going only this way with Wellbutrin, then sometimes they can't sleep well. So a dopamine antagonist kind of slows it down. It kind of just, so basically what we do with dopamine is, we call modulating dopamine. So it means that it gets dopamine where it's going forward when it needs to go forward, and it goes, but not too much. So basically Wellbutrin does that, and then Seroquel slows it down, but it doesn't slow it much too down because you got Wellbutrin. So they got this nice flow of dopamine. I call it balancing dopamine 24/7 because it's really helping on both ends of things. And so when you do that, you get the benefits of both without the negative and side effects of both. Because if she's only on Wellbutrin, she won't sleep well. If she's only on Seroquel and not Wellbutrin, she'll be tired all day. So when we put them together, it's a good mix. So she's been on this combination now for many years. I haven't made any changes in several years. She's been very stable. And so this is a really good success story from a woman who really suffered a lot for several years and had a pretty tough story, as you heard. So I hope you enjoyed the show today. If you have issues with mental health, or if you know someone who needs help, I'm available. If you want to contact my office, my website is drpaulcoronamd.com. That's DR for doctor. And you can also learn more about me on my website. My phone number, if you want to contact my office directly, is 949-481-0118. If you want to learn more about my methods and what I do, my latest book, I recommend The Corona Protocol, a scientifically proven medical solution to stop addiction, bullying, homelessness, school shootings, and suicide, 30 years in the making. In this book, I tell 30 original short stories about people. And I also have my first 3 books, Healing the Mind and Body, the trilogy, available online. I look forward to you joining me again on the next episode of The Dr. Paul Show.